Some of the worst jobs in terms of actual exploitation in the first world are Uber drivers. Because essentially, as studies have shown, the vast majority of Uber drivers don't actually make any money when they consider the cost of actually being this operator for Uber. Their pay is less than what they have to give out in terms of repairs for their cars, their times, etc. So essentially, what has happened as the Supreme Court, the UK's Supreme Court has ruled that they must be held as employees. They can no longer be considered contractors. That means thousands of Uber drivers are now entitled to minimum wage and holiday pay. So the very much exploitative economic model used by Uber seems to be, well, frankly, dead in the UK. Now, of course, because the news of this hit the media, Uber's share price dropped as trading began on Friday as investors grappled with what was the impact that London ruling could have on the firm's business model. In other words, Uber will be less profitable because workers will be given not just better, but a bare minimum compensation for the work that they do. Now, the ruling could have a much wider impact on the ride-hailing app, facing hefty competition bill and the bill and wider consequences for the larger gig economy. Because if this works for Uber, then this is going to go for Uber Eats. This is going to go for DoorDash. This is going to go for all of the ride-sharing services. And basically, the profitability of these companies is going to go down. They're going to have to start paying a VAT tax in the UK of 20%, which will probably be passed on to the customer. In other words, the real face of capitalism here, that, competition only really works so long as you treat people as less than working class people because they are not even getting the minimum working compensation for their labor, which would be driving the cars, and is their own cars to begin with. Now, the ruling says the court determined that drivers were in a position of subordination to Uber, where the only way they could increase their earnings would be to work longer hours. In other words, there really wasn't this fantasy free market kind of nonsense where you're your own boss when you work for Uber and you decide your hours and there's major flexibility and you can do whatever it is that you want, except that you don't actually make enough money to do any of the previously mentioned actions. It's kind of like how Tim Hortons in Canada says, Tim Hortons is one of the best employers in Canada because there's very flexible hours. Well, I suppose when you only get 2 shifts a week, yeah, I guess that's pretty flexible. You got a lot of time home for your family when you don't have enough hours to be able to get by. So Uber now has to consider drivers workers from the time they log on to the app to the time they log off. And now this is very key because Uber drivers tend to spend a lot of time sitting around waiting for someone to hire them. And that's a lot of downtime which they are not getting paid for. So that's essentially unpaid time, which, in theory seems good, but in reality it leads to poverty level incomes. So this is very significant because this does set a precedent. Now, this is only in the UK, but this is a kind of precedent that can be argued for other jurisdictions around the world, which would change the very nature of the relationship between workers and the capitalists exist with regards to this gig economy kind of nonsense. I thought gig economy is a nice way of saying super exploitation, because you now have to give them even less. And that's what it's about. A gig economy makes no economic sense whatsoever for a capitalist unless the capitalist can pay less. That's why downsizing exists. That's why outsourcing exists, because it's cheaper. There's literally no other rationale for taking these actions. It's about paying workers less, or finding another group of workers in a more dire economic situation and using them as a cheaper source of labor. So this ruling is going to be a real kick in the pants for Uber to start treating their employees better. But what the economic fallout from this has yet to be seen. We don't know exactly obviously fares are going to go up because they're going to pass the cost off onto the people, which actually does show in the end capitalism can't actually provide a service properly, which is why you need state infrastructure to do it. But I digress. So that's the basic gist of the whole situation for the ruling with Uber inside the UK. And now their employees, which they will now be marked as employees, will have rights that they did not have before.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.